Hello there, this is Yana for Papertrey Inc. and thank you for joining me today. In this video, I will show you how to make one-layer monochromatic wedding congratulations cards with a partial die-cut window, and we'll also do some shadow stamping for one-of-a-kind look. The stamps I'm using today come from the To Have and To Hold stamp set. Beautiful floral set for weddings and love cards. I have stamped several test pieces to show you different options and also to test a few ideas out. This is something I always do whenever I start working on my cards, especially cards that require a lot of stamping. So here's one of the ideas. This is the design we will be stamping today. In addition to the To Have and To Hold stamp set, I also used a sentiment from the Bold and Beautiful sentiment set. The heart here is partially die-cut, and coordinating dies for the To Have and To Hold stamp set allow you to cut the inner, the outer, or both edges of the heart out, and that makes it very convenient and ideal for many different techniques. If you use just the inner die, you can cut a window and have a stamped heart outline around it. If you use the outer die, you can cut the entire heart shape out and again, have an interesting looking window with maybe your stamped image recessed inside of that window. And of course, you can combine both the inner and the outer dies together. Now, the To Have and To Hold stamp set has many small florals and leaves. These are great to embellish the heart, and there are coordinating dies for them as well. So you can have a heart and next a stamp, die cut and pop up a few florals and maybe add a few leaves, to make the heart dimensional and a little fuller. I decided to do something slightly different and use those tiny images to fill the heart shape in and to have a solid heart, not just an outline. So something different and a little bit outside the box. The same way you can use the shapes and fill the space around the heart and reserve the inside of a heart for, say, a sentiment. I used 2 colors of ink here to fill the heart shape in and heat embossed a sentiment from the Better Together stamp set in gold embossing powder. It's hard to read it and it would have looked better in black, but I still wanted to share this idea with you. Here is another idea where I used a small image to dress up a sentiment. So you can use any sentiment you have, large sentiments work better for this, and stamp tiny leaves and flowers next to the sentiment for a different look. To create the cards I'm sharing in this video, I made A2 side-folding note cards. I've already placed one of my cards inside my Misty, and I also have the heart image mounted onto the Misty door. The image goes off the edge of my card. I'm going to make 2 cards today using 2 color combinations, gold and teal and gold and green. For my teal color, I went with tropical teal, and for the green, I went with ripe avocado. I love these colors and I find they work particularly well with gold. Now, you don't have to use a Misty or a similar stamp positioner to stamp these. A clear block will work just as well. I'm using a stamp positioner here to be able to double stamp my images and get the most perfect impression possible. But again, you don't have to do this. I'm also going to stamp a sentiment. For this, I'm using one that says, "So happy for you, congratulations," and I'm stamping this in black ink. Again, I'm using my Misty, and I will keep the stamp in the Misty until the very end, as I will be using it once again when my stamping is all done to add heat embossing and create the drop shadow effect. Now, I also need to stamp identical sentiment on the inside of my card, and I need to stamp it in the exact same spot as on the front. So I'm going to open my card base up and fold it the other way and stamp the sentiment on the inside of the card. I am stamping it on the inside as well as on the outside, so when I go to create a window in the front panel, my sentiment will continue on the inside of the card and I won't have just a partial stamped sentiment there. Using a Misty here is very helpful as I can have exact placement. I'm going to fold my card back to the usual way and I'm going to use a piece of washi tape to close it shut. I will remove it later, but for now I need my card to stay shut so I can do some stamping on the front. So like I mentioned, the small images, leaves and flowers can be used to dress up the heart wreath. You can stamp them in various colors, cut out using coordinating dies and pop onto the wreath. I wanted to do something very different, so I'm using these to fill in the space inside the wreath. The best way to do this is to start with the largest images first and work your way to the smallest images to be able to fill in even the tiniest gaps. If you start with the small images and work your way to the large images, you might end up not having enough space for the large images. So it's always best to start the other way around. I'm using same color of ink I used to stamp the heart outline, as I want this image to look like it was intended like that. But you can always mix colors and use a different color of ink for the flowers, for the leaves, and tiny dot clusters. I'm also going to use same tiny images to add some stamping next to the letter C on my sentiment. I'm not adding any flowers here, I'm just stamping leaves, hearts, and finally a cluster of tiny dots. I also did the same stamping on my other card, the one where I stamped the heart in ripe avocado ink. The pattern inside the green heart wasn't identical to the blue one, and that's absolutely okay. So when you go to stamp your cards, do not try to copy this 100%. Let the image, the design flow. One tip I would give you is to try not to overlap the images or not to have the images touch. Although the outline of the heart consists of images that do overlap, so maybe having the inside overlap is a good idea. So maybe try that as well. After my stamping was done, I walked away from my cards for about 10 or 20 minutes. I was filming in the morning, so I went and had breakfast. I'm mentioning this because this time allowed the ink to dry on my paper. Paper tray ink inks are dry to the touch right after you stamp them, but they do need time to dry completely, so I allowed my cards some extra time to dry. The next step is to add heat embossed sentiment and create a drop shadow look. I placed my cards inside my Misty tool. I still have my sentiments stamp in there. I didn't move it. I didn't dock the card base inside the corner like I did the first time when I stamped the sentiment in black ink. But this time I pushed my card base up just a fraction of an inch. You can barely see that, but that is enough to create a drop shadow effect. Because I want to do heat embossing, I used my anti-static powder tool and went over the area I plan to heat emboss with it. This tool helps eliminate static and grease from your fingers, and it allows heat embossing to stay nice and clean. I've inked up my image with Versamark ink. This is clear sticky ink, and stamped it. Here you can see that the image is indeed offset on the paper. And once I add gold embossing powder, you'll notice that gold impression is slightly below the black one. And you can decide where you want the shadow to be. I wanted mine to be above the sentiment, but you can also have it below, or to the left, or to the right. I'm going to repeat this and will stamp identical image onto my teal panel. And once again, I have a nice drop shadow effect. You don't have to use a Misty for this. This can be done with a clear block. But I find Misty or a similar stamp positioner makes it easier, faster, and more precise to do. I have my heat tool. I'm going to heat it up and we'll go ahead and melt the powder and emboss this image. I'm using thicker cardstock for my card base. This is Neenah Solar White, 110 pound, so it doesn't warp as much from the heat that I'm applying. Here's a close-up of that embossing. I just love the way it turned out. Okay, now let's create a window. You can definitely leave your card like this, but I wanted to step mine up, so I'm going to use the inner heart outline die and we'll cut the inside of the heart out. I've aligned the die on my card base. Notice that I opened the card base to avoid cutting through the front and through the back, and I cut the heart out in my platinum die cutting machine. Now I'm going to reposition the heart onto my card. First, I'm adding double-sided adhesive, and next I'm going to close the card base and we'll place the die cut inside the open space. And when you open the card, you can read the sentiment and see that beautiful floral shape. So here are both of my cards finished. I love the look of the partial die cut window and also the drop shadow. These cards are also mail-friendly, so they can be easily mailed in a simple envelope as there's no bulk to them. So this finishes today's video. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope I was able to inspire you to create. Be sure to check out video description for more information. I will see you next time. Bye!